Hey, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness, episode 181. We're going to talk about managing your personal power, what your relationship is to power, how you can cultivate it, use it, all those things around that. So we actually have an expert today, Christian de la Huerta, who's an award-winning author, acclaimed speaker at various settings, including universities, conferences, corporate trainings, spiritual communities, and even the TedX stage. And his book is called Awakening the Soul of Power. So transforming your relationship with power, not selling out on your personal power, freeing yourself from some self-sabotaging behaviors that might be reducing your power or causing conflict inside of you. So we also talk a lot about this masculine feminine dynamic, being, of course, that he is a man and I'm a woman, how we've been programmed and how we've been acculturated to view different states of feminine and masculine power. So I hope you really like this episode. And also, I've got this really great course launching, Stand, Speak, Shine, the course, Stand, Speak, Shine. You can find that on my website. It's been revamped, relaunched. It's an evergreen. You can go at your own pace, 12 feminine embodiment practices that you can cultivate over a 12-week period of time if you want to go for it, or just take your time and really come into knowing these states for yourself so you can land in your body, be real, be who you are authentically, and rise to your own personal power. So just had to add that there because we are talking about power, and I'm so passionate about empowering women. And that's found on standspeakshine.com or on my website, cherieburton.com. You can find it there as well. So now let's have a great listen to Managing Your Personal Power with Christian de la Huerta. Christian, congratulations. One of my few male interviews that I do.
I am honored. Thank you so much, Sherry, for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah, thank you. I don't mean that I purposely exclude men. I just don't get a lot of approaches to be interviewed by men. And I know that your work is really centered on feminine empowerment. And that is one of the reasons that I was so drawn to do this interview, because I love it from a male perspective. And your book, Awakening the Soul of Power, I love the name.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about, I know you've done TedX and you've done a lot of stuff in the speaking arena, and you've done obviously writing, and it looks like you've done a lot of corporate training, a lot of spiritual work. So you have a lot of varied experience in kind of, I guess, communicating messages to people as a thought leader. So tell me how that happened upon you. Like, how did you land in that space of doing that?
Well, I've always kind of had a sense of mission, a desire to make a difference in the world and to make a difference in real human lives, which kind of showed up in different ways at different points in my life. So at some point I thought I was going to be a priest.
Wow.
And I studied psychology. My dad was a psychiatrist. I thought I was going to follow that track. And 30 years ago, I discovered breath work, and my life took a whole other direction. I've been doing that now for 30 years, as well as the writing and the speaking and the teaching and coaching and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's still the same mission.
Yeah, I love that the pathway was breath work. That's kind of your entry into that. In fact, I just did an interview yesterday with a woman who we were talking about how powerful breath work can be as a practice when you're in group settings. And I don't know if that's where you took it or how you, like if you led groups, but we were like, sometimes people can have such a pronounced, reaction's not the right word, experience in the negative and positive, like trauma can come up. And so it's just like beholden to that facilitator to really hold space and give each person in that circle the right attention.
Yeah, I've done thousands and thousands of sessions all over the world.
Wow.
And, a lot of them group, a lot of them individual. And I've yet to come across anything that heals past trauma as quickly and as effectively with immediate results. And I work with people who have experienced a lot of trauma, from sexual abuse to rape to violent stuff, and it gets healed, and it's still, to my mind, to my logical, more skeptical scientific mind, it it's hard to understand how it can work so powerfully, because it heals at multiple levels, not just psychologically and emotionally, but mentally, spiritually, and even physically. And yes, that's, to me, that still sounds too good to be true, but it works.
Yeah.
And after 30 something years of doing this, I can't argue with results. It works.
Yeah, I love that you're about that. I can't remember his name. I want to say it's Andrew Weil. He has a beard. I have his book.
Yeah,
have you
Dr.
studied
Weil.
his work? He's kind of the pioneering person, I think, that brought it to the forefront. Of course, yogi science and the old methods, the ancient methods definitely employed breath work. But let's talk a bit about breath in relation to power. I know you teach different practices and protocols, I guess, to be able to help people really embody themselves and come into that relationship to power. Do you see kind of breath as one of those pathways or portals to be able to do that?
Yeah, I use in my retreats and workshops and coaching, I use two main healing tools. Breathwork is definitely one of the two constants, because again, it works so fast and heals so profoundly. And one of the ways that it's effective in this relationship to power, the other one, by the way, is understanding the ego mind and why we do the things we do, and why we limit ourselves, and how we free ourselves from its self-made prison of fear and lack and limitation and victimization and judgment and reactivity, etc. But the breathwork part of it clears a lot of the underlying past trauma and mindset issue beliefs that we've taken on along the way that result in our giving away our power. Right. So if we've got, which most of us do have, some constellation of belief that we're not good enough, or that we're not worthy, or that there's something wrong with us, or we're too much of this, not enough of that. The breathwork heals that really fast, because of those underlying self-esteem issues. Those are the reasons we give away our power. That's what the core of our fear of rejection, or fear of, or like the desire for not wanting to rock the boat too much. So once we go to the core of it, then it makes stepping into our own power and being able to take a stand for our beliefs and for what we believe is right, and for our desires, for our preferences, much more easily. And we become less dependent on external validation.
So really the goal, as I'm hearing you iterate, is that we want to come to the emotion that's generating the biological or physiological response. What if somebody can't name, they just don't know what they're feeling? They're all over the place. I meet a lot of people who are having a hard time naming their emotion.
Sure.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, and I totally relate. If you would have asked me 30 years ago what I was feeling, I couldn't have told you. I had no idea what I was feeling. And that's even with a psychiatrist's father, who was a great psychiatrist.
He probably helped raise you to name your emotions, right?
I know, but the things he was great with others, but with his own emotions, clueless. So I grew up clueless. And so one practice that I took on, I found a grid of emotions, and figured out, we read what each of them meant. And then this is before iPhones. So I had a timer, in my pocket, and I'd set it for every hour, and every hour had a grid. And so I'd go, just pause 30 seconds. That's all it takes. And I go, am I feeling that? Am I feeling that? Am I feeling that? Maybe. And just even doing that a couple of weeks, really brought up my emotional awareness, my EQ, which we now know from all, so much of the business schools and the business journals are saying that emotional intelligence, EQ, is critical skill for leadership in the 21st century.
I love that. I have 6 children, and I've tried to guide them, especially my sons, into not masking their emotions. I have 3 sons, 3 daughters, not masking their emotions, and helping them to try to identify what they're feeling. And I think their generation has caught on that it's you're not a sissy if you show emotion. And it's that word sissy, is just mocking the feminine, right?
Yeah. Well, you just named it right there, right? The reason that most guys are conditioned to not feel emotions. Since we're boys, a lot of us grow up hearing, little boys don't cry. And why is that? Why is it that little boys don't cry? Is it only little girls cry? And so that means that we have turned the feminine into weakness. It's like, wait a minute, like two very faulty assumptions in that statement. One is that the feminine is weak. It's like, wait a minute, you want to talk power, courage, resilience, strength? Like, let's talk about the power of creation that resides in a female body. And I hope this is appropriate for your audience, but it reminds me of something I read about Betty White, who just left us a few months ago. Yeah. And apparently she was in one of those group celebrity interviews, and somebody said something about having balls. And she said, wait a minute, how do we get this connection between having balls and strength and courage? You thump those little things and the guy collapses, bends over in pain. You want to talk courage and strength and power? Let's talk vaginas. Those things take a pounding.
Whoa. Yeah. Well, we have the ovaries. Ours are inner. It's everything that the feminine is down and in. It's inward. It's guttural. It's, and so, yeah, it's so interesting that I look at all the euphemisms that were like circulating on the playground and the locker rooms and things like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, no wonder men or boys didn't feel safe in the expression of emotion. And we're seeing the fallout from that. I sort of have a theory on that. Maybe you can back me up on this. I believe that's why men's bodies are stiffer. Like it's harder for them to get into yoga poses. Just overall, I know they have a greater muscle mass and all that. So there's probably something physiological as well, but also like the inflexibility, the rigidness of trying to hold everything in and not having that fluid, the flow of emotions, the watery emotions.
For sure, without a doubt. And this connects to the whole conversation about power, by the way, because in this last several thousand years of the patriarchal system of toxic masculinity, of power over, you're going to do it my way or the highway, cowboy mentality. Because we turn the emotions into weakness, men walk around like these uncaring, unfeeling robots. And not only men, some women do too, but mostly, for the most part, men, we've gotten this misunderstanding of what it means to be a man. And so there's a price to pay for that. The other assumption that we were talking about in Little Boys Don't Cry is that the emotions are weakness. It's like, wait a minute, the emotions are not strength. They're not weakness. They're not good. They're not bad. Depending on how we express them, they have a good or not so good effect. But in and of themselves, they're just emotion. What used to be spiritual teaching, that everything is energy, now we know from quantum physics that it's true. Everything is energy, meaning this desk that I'm sitting in front of, the chair, the body, the emotions, all energy, all vibration, even if it feels solid to us. And energy from physics, we know, cannot be destroyed. So all those times that we suppress our emotions, that we don't allow ourselves to express how we're feeling, that stuff doesn't go away. Yeah. It gets stuck in the tissues of our bodies. And after years and decades and a lifetime of suppressing emotions, we walk around with layers upon layers upon layers of repressed emotional crap. And then here we are trying to have a relationship in the present, all of it getting filtered through that lifetime of unhealed past trauma and repressed emotions. Yikes. Like it boggles the mind that any relationships can work. And for men in particular, like there's a price to pay. Right? So because those emotions have to come out one way or the other. Right. So what happens, either we suppress, and then the next poor, unfortunate one says something to us the wrong way, and boom, volcanic explosion, causing harm to our relationships. Sometimes irreparably, or suppress. That energy has to come out one way or another, start seeping out and showing up as physical symptoms, cancer, heart attacks, ulcers. And I think that's one of the reasons why men had the longevity numbers. Women outlive men by 5 years in the US, by 7 years globally. And what's up with that? Because
also, embryonic females outlive male. There's there's a lower morbidity rate for the gestational female. Yeah.
I didn't know that. And I think it's partly because we walk around like with all these suppressed emotions, and there's got to be a price to pay for that physically. If we look at the suicide rate in the U.S., men commit suicide 4 times as frequently as women do. And in fact, 70% of the suicides in the U.S. are committed by middle-aged white men. What's up with that? Because, that's still the group that holds the majority of the power in the world. And so shouldn't there be some kind of benefit for that in terms of quality of life and longevity? But no, there's a price to pay. And I think it's related to what we're talking about, this suppression of the emotions.
Yeah. And like you were talking about with power, I mean, if you feel powerless, you feel hopeless, that you don't have some semblance of, not control, maybe that's not the right word, but you don't have some kind of power to exert in your environment or in your body. I always like to say, the patriarchy affects men just as it does women.
Yes.
Not about male, female, whatever. It's just, hey, we've all been harmed by this seizing of our emotions and the unsafety that's been created in just being our own essence. And it's it's sad. I mean, I love that there's more talk about this. I don't know how long it's going to take because there's a lot of us talking about this right now, and I don't know how long it's going to take for this to really shift into more of this egalitarian, shared. It's not about matriarchy or patriarchy. It's about both sexes coming together, or however you identify as a gender, and just coming together with that masculine and feminine energy and working together, collaborating, which is very feminine. So I say the men have been, the privileged white male, whatever you want to call it, the dominating class and the wealthy elite. So whatever that is, it's happening in religions and governments and academia and in families until we really get clear on what is making us sick, which you just spoke so brilliantly to. We're sick because we cannot express, and whether it's our creativity, our voice, our emotions, that's what's making everyone sick. We don't have shared voice.
Agreed. And like this book, Awakening the Soul of Power that we're talking about, it's for everybody because we all struggle with issues around power. But it has a particular message for women. And that stems from my conviction that the empowerment of women is the single most important thing that needs to happen in the world. And it's not to idealize women. It's not to put women up on a pedestal. It's not to give women more crap that they have to clean up in this world. It's because as a species, as a world, we've been running so off balance, like you're talking about, between the feminine and the masculine energies. And I believe that when women are in 50% of power in this world, and we're not even close to that, we're going to have a very different relationship to war and poverty and hunger and social justice and education and how we treat the environment, to all of it, all the issues that we're facing. And so for me, I think about it strategically, like what is the one thing that we could focus on that will then impact everything else? And that's what I land on.
So I love what you're saying. And I actually got goosebumps. Okay. I think what I'm hearing you say is that when individuals awaken to their own power, that will sort of forge this organic movement. Maybe not is the right word, but it has to hit critical mass at some point. Yes. I don't know when that's going to be, but I do see a lot of people awakening to this.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of systems really resisting it.
I'm with you. That's what I'm banking on. I know that the original story behind the 100th monkey effect was turned out to be a myth that wasn't quite that way. But I'm still banking on that critical mass, that at some point enough of us gets it, and then boom, it spreads. Like the story about the 100th monkey effect. But it's the power thing is really interesting because that's part of what we're seeing in the world. That's part of what we're struggling with. And we see it both in the personal and the macro, invading another country just because you have the might to do that. And so why is it that we struggle with issues around power? Part of it is because I think we might we fear that if we really stepped into our power, into all of who we are, that other people might reject us and not be able to handle it. And we might end up alone. And who wants that?
And that is like a super core fear.
I know.
That feels like the most primal fear, is that you're going to be alone.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're wired to belong. We're wired to coexist and interact,
yes,
co-create.
Exactly.
That's like, oh yeah. And in the past, women most specifically have been killed, and they still are being killed, muzzled, maimed, burned, you know, taken out for speaking up. So there's this collective fear that lives there as well.
It's in the DNA, and we know that now, you know, also from science, that trauma gets passed on epigenetically through the DNA. So we all have that, but especially women, you know, even more so. And so then combine that fear of rejection with the fear that we might abuse it. Because I think that's also going on, and no wonder. Because all we got to do is turn on the news any given day, or glance through the headlines online to witness at least one abuse of power daily, and then you add to that, you know, the fact that we've been conditioned to believe that power is a bad thing, with quotes like "power corrupts," and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
What is power then? Like, how would you define it in this healthy way?
But you know what they didn't tell us about that quote is that Lord Acton, who spoke those words, was speaking specifically about political power, not the personal power that you and I are talking about. So when you put all that into the mix and add to the mix what we were talking about, the suppression of emotions, we hate conflict, we avoid confrontation. What happens is that we end up giving away our power, our innate, inherent power that nobody can give to us. Nobody can take it away. We are the only ones who give it away. And the sad part, as we've been talking about and alluding to, is the reasons for which we give it away. Like, we say yes when inside we feel no, for an illusion of security. We stuff ourselves into small little packages to not rock the boat. You know, we put on a fake smile, and stuff our convictions, our beliefs for that false sense of acceptance, and for morsels. We settle for crumbs of pseudo love, and it's not an effective strategy. So that's what this book is about. How do we step into power in a different way that is now about externals, that because we tend to associate power with things outside of us. That's the way that the world thinks of power.
Yeah, you know, I want to know what you think about this. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
Because I'm afraid I'm going to forget it if I don't say it.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I feel like I was saying yes so many times when I got a no, because I was trying to please God. So mine came from this relationship to God's power over me. It was how I interpreted it, because I was raised very religiously, and lived most of my life very devout in terms of, I don't want to say subservience, because I did feel empowered in many respects, but it felt like I was on this wheel of just trying to please God all of the time. And I can see now how he, she, whatever, right? God, Goddess didn't want me to do that. It wanted to be more of a co-creative.
Yes.
That my performance, my worth was not tied into what I was doing. But I have to say, it got laid down in my neural patterning.
Yes.
As just like my default. Always giving away. When I would get a no about something, and let's just say I was asked to do something for someone else, I'd be like, well, God would probably want me to do that for that person.
Right.
And I can't let God down. I can't let Jesus down. Right. So I would really like your take on that. I don't know if you've had much experience with religion or helping people through sort of that.
I was raised very, very Catholic. I'm one of 9 kids. Are you kidding me? And so, but the thing is about that image of God is a very patriarchal God, which, I mean, it's so much to say about this, because now you really opened up a big conversation.
No, I really felt intuitively like I needed to ask you this. Like, you have because you're right. Like, I was literally taught that patriarchy was the ideal. in my religion of origin.
Right. Well,
As you probably
before
were
we had a
in your
god,
religion.
we had a goddess. And in the days of the goddess, up until what, 6,000 or I don't know, several thousand years ago, that we didn't have this split. Like part of what came with the patriarchy is the split between the physical and the spiritual. So we created this artificial split. And by the way, we created God in our image rather than vice versa. Like we projected onto God the values of the culture that were at the time were saying is like, no, we gotta dominate women. So that's no wonder that they erected all the churches in the ancient goddess temple mounds and temple groves. So and like so many of the holidays were kind of overlaid to gather the power of the feminine. And again, like you and I were saying, we're not advocating one over the other. You and I are advocating balance between the masculine and the feminine. But part of what happened is in that externalization of God is that we put the sacred, anything that we consider spiritual or sacred, we put it far away from us. Like, where the hell is heaven anyway? How much further away from us could we have placed it? So what that means is that anything that's of the physical, we turn into something that's inferior, something to be conquered, subjugated, controlled. So no wonder we treat the planet the way that we do. Yeah. In this, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am relationship of rape and pillage and take, without regard to our own survival. So it's not sustainable. And then the body, we animalized it. Sexuality, we demonized it. So no wonder we have sexual issues as a species. And part of what that, like in the days of the sacred, when women and the sacred feminine were honored, we didn't have that split. And everything like sexuality even was considered not only not the sin, not bad, not evil, but a very valid path to union, to yoga, to reconnecting with the sacred in the Eastern traditions. And in the indigenous traditions all over the world, they don't have that split to them. And sadly, we've kind of taken over that worldview.
Yeah. Well, it's, if you look at the earliest artifacts we have, they're of fertility and childbirth and a full bodied goddess. And some of them are very sexual in nature, but it's like you're saying, that was creation. That was God. And she was excised from all of those temples and completely wiped. Right. Yep.
That's right.
So with this patriarchal God, I just, in my mind's eye, I mean, you see religious artwork all over the place from all kinds of faith denominations and whatnot. But I would just picture this literal father figure on a throne. And I don't know why he was sitting on a throne. I mean,
because that's what we were told.
That's where we go, right? And the white beard and the whole thing.
And surrounded, the long white robe and surrounded by angels and and patronizing, busybody, micromanaging
my entire life, waiting for me to do something wrong so I could learn and be chastised and penance, I'm sure, in Catholicism, penance and, confession and all of that. I mean, that's pretty common in a lot of religions. In my religion of origin, which is Mormonism, there was a heavy emphasis on priesthood and reporting to priesthood, and priesthood presiding is still in effect, of course. But yeah, it kind of like bled over into God being like the person to report to and like overseeing, and instead of being in relationship with.
That's right.
And of course, there's no ready reference of a goddess that we can attach to, other than there might be one, but we don't know much about her. So it just created some identity formation issues around, most women I know are carrying that wound of not having a feminine God to pray to, or I don't want to say aspire to, but at least men have these role models, right? So yeah, it's just something I've worked through. Like I can look at my past and see how that wiring just got laid down like train tracks. Please God, please God, please God, please God. I'm going to disappoint God. And I want to be spiritual. I want to be accepted. I don't want to be alone in eternity, right? We talk about that primal fear. So it's like, of course, I'm going to bust my keister to try to do everything right. And that was the old me. Now I'm coming into more of this relationship, like you said, to that power, to, what good am I to the people that I am in relationships with if I can't stand in who I am and be myself and have my own spiritual essence, my own voice. So I think power can look, I'm sure you'd agree, it just looks different for everybody.
For sure. And that's the beauty of it. We get to express both our spirituality and our sexuality and our relationship to power in a way that is a match for who we are. And so then that becomes the journey, right? Discovering who we really are, because we've been so conditioned to make ourselves smaller and to think of ourselves as less, and especially women, because of what you were talking about. So this impacts everything, like even navigating moral issues. It's like, are we really, I'm asking myself, am I going to base my decisions about what's right and what's wrong, what's appropriate, what's not, on moral teachings that were brought in, written and translated and retranslated and mistranslated, and stuff was taken out and stuff was put in, and that were taken out of their cultural and historical context. Like women weren't even human then. Women were property. Am I going to base my choices about that? Nope. I don't think so. But then it opens up the question, and it's like, how do you navigate moral choices? Which is a whole other, we could do a whole show on that.
Well, I think and I think it just comes back to when you are lined up with your own authentic power, because there is false power and there's false authority. And we can, you mentioned the ego mind, like we could flip into that really quick. For me, it's been trying to stay lined up in my own embodiment. Yeah. When you were talking about how, in times past, I would have said yes when I felt no, like I don't want to. Yes. Now a no is a no.
Exactly.
And I know the difference, and I don't feel guilty. I might just have a little tinge of guilt, and then it just passes because I'm like, no, I'm putting myself first. I need to stay lined up, or I'm not good to anybody.
That's right. That's empowerment at the most basic core. And so that's what the book guides the reader through, is first of all, realizing that there are different kinds of power. So there's the external power, that we tend to associate with, like most of the world thinks of powerful people as those who have money, they're famous, or they have some high up in some kind of hierarchy, whether it's the the corporate ladder, or whether it's the, religious institution. But the thing about all those kinds of power, they're outside of us. And because of that, they're fickle. Here today, gone tomorrow. Whereas the other power that we're talking about, which I call spiritual power or soulful power, that is inherent to every one of us, and that only we can give away. It's like nobody can take that away. And whereas worldly power...
Some of these institutions would like to say, for instance, religious institutions, that they are the governing authority even over your own body.
Yeah. Self-appointed authority, by the way.
But they say that God has appointed them, that they are acting.
That's what they claim. Like, but if we're talking about that busybody, punitive, vengeful, vindictive, judgmental God, is like, that's not my relationship to God. Like my relationship to God has nothing to do with that. I think that is the patriarchal God that we created in our image.
In our own image, yeah.
And I think that partly intentionally to exert control, not only over women, but over all of us, and put the fear of hell into us, and as a way to control the masses, to control people. And so I really take exception with that. That is not the God that I know.
Yeah, I hear you. I had to form God in my own image, which is, like, you shouldn't do that. But I had to literally flip to a female God for it to work for me. And now I see both standing in equal voice and authority, because as it stands right now, many religions say, oh yeah, there might be a mother God, or we have Mary, or we have this, but she doesn't have the equal
That's right.
Weight, if you will.
No.
So,
and she was turned into a virgin.
Yeah. So she's either a virgin or a whore. in most
right.
scriptural texts. So
Right.
there's a whole thing with that. But I still love the idea of emulating, like when I say I had to make God in my own image, I didn't mean that in a blasphemous way, but it was more like if I'm a woman, I want to feel like a woman birthed, like I have a mother. She gave birth to me.
Of course.
Why is that so hard for these patriarchal systems, religious institutions, theological seminaries, like the gamut, right? Why is that so off base to think that God would be a woman?
It's
God, and I should say male and female, father and mother.
It's like, the sacred is both masculine and feminine, just like all of creation is. We are the only, people that we know that just suppresses the feminine and turns it into something less, which is, to me, it's about power and the unhealthy worldly power. That's about exerting power over and controlling by fear and force and domination, or guilt or manipulation, rather than the more feminine expression of power, which is power with. And, it's like power, the worldly power is all about arrogance. It's about building itself to seem bigger than it is. It's about mine. It's about, it always has an agenda, trying to get something for itself. Whereas the more feminine power, which is no less powerful, and I even pose it's more powerful. It's about service. It's about making a difference. It doesn't need to prove anything to anybody because it knows. And it's humble. So I think of a Gandhi or a Gandalf. Or a Malala even, like in our time, in their simple monastic robes, their sandal feet, and not needing to prove anything to anybody. Like Gandhi brought the British Empire to its knees without ever shooting a gun or landing a punch. That's power. And that's the power that Jesus stood for, and Gandhi and Dr. King and many other spiritual beings throughout history.
Yeah. I have a poster thing going on over here or just a conglomerate sort of vision board of all my feminine heroines. So I've got Mary Magdalene, Joan of Arc, Isis. Who else do I have up there? I just love even Mother Mary and just Sophia, just images that speak to that humility that you're talking about. There's a humility, there's a dignity to it.
Yes.
That if you're going to wield this power, you recognize it's actually not it is your own, but it's not your own.
That's
meaning
right.
that you have to have a degree of reverence for it, especially if you're in a service capacity.
Totally.
So I've seen, like Mother Teresa, an example to me of someone who was very powerful.
Yes.
And also very humble. But I also know people on the flip side of that who maybe they're not in Calcutta, in a nun's attire, if you will, but they're like very well dressed, and like I'm just talking about like Oprah, okay, or Brene Brown. They still have that degree of awe and inquiry and curiosity and humility that I find so inspiring. I think, and I'm hopeful that there will be more women who rise to that level of wisdom, who are going to continue to speak out, whether it's a big stage or just in their family, that we just need, and the feminine awakening in men.
In all of us. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's so much we could keep exploring here. I feel like we hit, but I just, I'm grateful that you're including the feminine in your work. And that I know the book, Awakening the Soul of Power, I'm going to go grab it. I have not read it yet. But as I'm talking to you, I'm like, that sounds like something I would really like to read. But I was just struck with how you bring in feminine empowerment as sort of this catalyst that's going to blow it all open for us to heal this planet and the relationship that we have to humanity. And I just have to say one more thing. And as we were talking, I just kept getting this image of Putin. Like I don't want to get political or anything, but I think that things are like figures like him just like are ramping up in a consciousness as the extreme of what we're talking about, oligarchy and hierarchy and, totalitarianism and just these regimes that just, anyway, I just want to talk about Putin for a second
and we don't have to look as far as Russia. Like, it's happening here too.
Oh yeah.
It's happening here too. Yes. And it's what we were talking about before, is a dramatic change, dramatic social change. The power structures are changing globally. And for some percentage of people, mostly men, that's very scary. That's very threatening. So, no. We got to go back to the way it was. Some image, illusion, memory that we're never going to go back to. It's not going to happen. But that's that desire to go for the big, strong, daddy image, the dictatorial. You're going to tell us what to do, and you're going to tell us what's right and what's wrong, and there's one and only way. And the theological pissing contest, my God is bigger than yours, and all that stuff that is just no longer sustainable, because we're going to blow each other up in the name of God, ironically.
Yes, isn't it? Most wars start from religious ideology differences. But well, thank you, Christian. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it. Where can people find your book?
Yeah, and thank you for having me on the show, and for having the show, because I know that it makes a difference, getting these messages out there, and this message that is what your podcast is about, which is empowering women, that really it's timely and necessary and very important, critically important. So in terms of the book is available wherever books are sold. You can get it at your local bookstore if you want to support them. You can order it on Amazon. And in terms of reaching me, probably my website is the best way, and that from there they can access my social media, and the website is soulfulpower.com, SOULFUL power.com. And for your audience, if they will go to soulfulpower.com and get on my email list, and we all know how easy it is to click on subscribe down the road if it doesn't work for you. But anybody who does get on my email list, will send them a sample chapter of the book, one that talks about what it means to live a heroic life in the 21st century. We'll send them some power practices that are designed to integrate the teachings into our life, so that it doesn't stay at the level of information, right? Because we don't need more information. We've got information overload. Yes. What we need is transformation. And that comes from really applying and living the teachings. And then we'll send them a guided meditation, a short teaching about trust and how to live in trust with a guided meditation in these times of chaos and fear and uncertainty. Oh, awesome. Well, that sounds like some good stuff. So we will have those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. Thanks again for having me out. I love this discussion on just using our own relationship to power in a way that is a match for who we really are, not who we're trying to be or not who everyone else wants us to be or who we think we need to be, but actually who we are, who we innately are. As we talked about, we've been so conditioned to make ourselves small, to shrink, to not be seen and heard, when actually that's our greatest desire, especially as women, is to be seen and heard. So we can navigate through so much complexity when we know who we are, when we retain our personal power, we source it within ourselves, we plug in, of course, to the source, and then we are just this magnetic presence for others who allows others to be who they are and gives them permission to use their own voice. So I just love the whole concept of empowerment. And you can find Christian on soulfulpower.com. And I hope you'll take the time to just really get clear on what might be siphoning my power and what might be fueling it. Because that's really the question when we talk about being successful at anything, is our right use of power in the form of our own personal energy. So thanks for listening. And again, please, those of you who are wanting to plug into more personal power, my empowerment program for women, my online course, is a self-paced internet course, Stand, Speak, Shine. So you can find that on standspeakshine.com. Have a glorious week, and we will talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.